These days, everyone is trying to figure out how to become an aim god, trying everything from advanced Kovaak routines to metronomes and even sticking little sliders on the bottom of their mouse. And some of these ideas are absolutely insane, and they might end up being complete waste of time. But of course, if even one of those crazy ideas is right, and most other players think it's too wild to even try out, then everyone who does use it will end up getting much better, much faster, and will end up becoming the aim god that they desire to be. But if you truly want to get better aim and you're willing to test out crazy aim ideas, then here's my key recommendation for you. You need to look towards the science. And think of it, if something is proven to work in a clinical controlled setting, shouldn't you put more faith in it than some random YouTuber or some guy on Reddit talking about aim geometry? Or at least shouldn't you put enough faith into it to test it out for yourself? Of course, what I'm really doing here is ultimately setting you up for what's going to be the craziest aim training tactic out of all of them. Aim training blindfolded. Kind of. I think it deserves a little bit of explanation. So, in an article on basketball free throws, it shed some interesting light on what it takes to actually improve your motor skills. In the study, they experimented with different types of training methods to see which is the most effective. The first method is what you're probably used to in your average aim training. It's what they called error-based learning. Now, the error-based learning group got to shoot like normal, simply shooting and noticing when they missed their shot and thus making immediate adjustments. And the results were as expected. The group quickly got better and showed a significant performance boost right away. But this is where things got a bit strange, because when they were tested 7 days later, those same performance improvements seemed to have suddenly vanished. Their accuracy went all the way back to the baseline as if they hadn't done the initial training at all. And consider this in your own aim training. You can actually practice a specific aim training drill like you have many times and feel like you're improving one day over the next. Then, if you stop training it a week later, it might end up feeling as if it's completely gone back to baseline. But how do you stop that? How do you stop yourself from training and improving on a short-term basis only for that skill to completely fade over time? Well, understanding why this happens might be the key to breaking through your skill plateaus and actually finally getting good aim. So let's get a little sciencey for just a second. Now, when you learn a skill, your brain develops what's called a motor controller, basically a plan of how to execute that skill. Then, as you execute the skill or practice it with error-based learning, you're essentially refining and optimizing that execution plan. Unfortunately, these optimizations are very fragile. It's often like editing a Word document but not being able to hit save on it. You'll have those changes short term and see them right away, but as soon as you restart your computer, you'll still have the old document. And the sad truth is that a lot of our aim training feels like this, as if we're editing a document that's bugged out and can't be saved. Fortunately, there's a way around it, which is to create a new motor controller, essentially like making changes to a Word document that actually lets you save it. And this is where we come back to the study for what's called the reinforcement learning group. This group was able to start the trial with full vision of the basket, so they could get an initial idea of how to throw the ball. But then their vision and hearing were blocked out so that they couldn't get any more stimuli to help them with the shot. They then had to take shots with the only feedback being whether they made it or not. Because they were shooting without any feedback at all, they were forced to focus internally and explore different motor patterns. Now, this level of challenge and the need to search for new motor patterns actually caused them to shoot worse in the short term, even when they were tested without a blindfold after it. In fact, at baseline, before the study even started, they shot at a 30.6% accuracy. And immediately after they had the blindfolded training, they shot at 26% accuracy. But again, this is where things start to get interesting. Because when they were tested a week later, things had completely reversed. Their performance actually went up. They ultimately went from that baseline of 30.6% accuracy all the way up to 41.66%. Overall, around a 35% upgrade in their skill, which isn't too bad at all. Now, of course, looking at this study and thinking about it, it doesn't seem to make any sense on the surface, but it's exactly what I mentioned before. By training your skills with reinforcement-based learning, you're forcing a level of exploration that creates a new motor pathway in your mind, essentially letting you save that new document. This is extremely powerful because it means that we now have the answer for overriding our bad aim and creating a new motor pathway so that we can finally see significant improvements. But the big question here is how we can actually turn this theory into reality, how you can apply this to your own aim training. Should you start running around your ranked games with the blindfold on, or turn off your monitor while you're in AimLabs? Well, the key goal of applying the reinforcement method to aim training is to encourage the exploration of new motor plans and then reinforce the successful movements. Limiting your visual and auditory feedback, or even removing it completely, can help us achieve this goal, but it needs to be done in a realistic way. Practicing your tracking skills without seeing the enemy doesn't make much sense at all. So for training with dynamic or moving targets, then limiting your vision rather than blocking it would be much more ideal. This might mean making your own crosshair or even the enemy more difficult to see, or perhaps even reducing the opacity of your screen overall to add that layer of difficulty. Now, when it comes to stationary aim training and practicing your flicks, we can relate much more to the basketball free throws. Here, the equivalent would be centering your screen, much like seeing the basket in the basketball study, and taking note of where the target is. Of course, you might want to start this first with a rather large target to make this more realistic. But then, just like in the study, you'll want to sort of blindfold yourself or simply just close your eyes and then attempt to flick to the target. Of course, this will require that sort of internal focus to try and figure out where that target is, even though you don't have the visual stimuli to help you out. And as you'll likely miss, you'll then want to recenter and keep trying until you hit it. Now, ideally, you'll want to practice on a target that requires multiple hits to break, so that a new target won't spawn somewhere else in the scenario right away. You'll actually have to practice on that same target until you hit it 4 or more times. Now, of course, you can already do this manually with certain scenarios that already exist in AimLab or Kovaak with a bit of scenario tweaking or changing the settings. But if anyone from AimLab or Kovaak is actually watching this, then hit me up and we can turn this into a proper scenario. So I urge you to set up an experiment for yourself and try this out for at least 7 days. Whether that's applying my suggestions or setting up your very own experiment to bring this theory to life. Make the focus on applying reinforcement learning with a realistic expectation for how it might affect your short-term performance, but how it can improve it in the long term. Once you've found something that actually starts to work, I then encourage you to combine it with your normal aim training, because while reinforcement learning seems to be a critical aspect for improvements, it doesn't mean that normal training is useless. Simply the other half of a two-part whole. So, throw your experimental ideas into the comments below and then come back in a week or two and give us an update on how it went for you. Because as I mentioned at the start of the video, while many theories and aim training experiments might seem crazy on the surface, those who adopt them might just get an advantage that helps them improve much faster and much farther and helps them ultimately become an aim god. Now, if you're sick of getting hard stuck and you want to use science to get an advantage over other players, then I highly recommend the Esports Elite course. It's a complete roadmap of science-based improvement tactics that will allow you to reach the top 1% of players in record time. Of course, all of it is science-based, with a lot of ideas that most others in esports, even many pros and their coaches, don't even know about. The 66-day challenge, where you'll put everything into practice and improve at record speeds. So join the course with the link in the description and see how much you can improve in 66 days. And with that said, I hope you guys absolutely loved the video. I hope you keep on grinding and keep on improving, and I'll see you all in the next video.